Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In this video, we'll discuss the story that occurred in Cleveland, Ohio. On July 31st, 2006, Matthew Podolak, who felt sick, was admitted to Parma General Hospital. Shortly before that, Matthew had already sought medical help and complained of extreme back pain. Doctors prescribed him medications for kidney stones, but the medications did not help him, and after only 4 days, he was in the hospital again. His condition was rapidly deteriorating. Unfortunately, despite all the efforts of medical professionals, Matthew died on the same day, July 31st. Matthew Patrick Matt Podolak was born on June 10, 1975 in Ohio, USA, to Patricia Romano and Leonard Podolak. In high school, Matthew was a member of the hockey team. After graduating from high school, he joined the U.S. Navy. After becoming a civilian again, Matthew got a job at Phoenix Industrial Finishing, a company owned by his uncle. He had an uneasy relationship with his colleagues. Here's what his sister, Chrissy DeLuca, said about this. There were some people at his job. They had not liked him. It was his uncle's company, and, people I think were a little jealous. He was supposed to get a promotion, and I think there were some people who didn't think he deserved it. His uncle was grooming him to one day take over the business. An outdoorsman, Matthew enjoyed boating, camping, and hunting. He also played softball and hockey in his spare time. In 2003, Matthew met Holly McFeature. They started dating soon after and subsequently moved in together in a Cleveland home. Friends described Matthew as a man who was thrilled to be able to find someone to settle down with and start a family. Within a year, they had their first child, Samantha, and about 2 years later, they had a son named Josh. A third child from a previous relationship of Holly McFeature's was also part of the family. When Matthew fell in love, he fell 110% and he really loved Holly, said his mother, Patricia. Thus, in such a short amount of time, Matthew went from a bachelor to a father of 3. The first few years of his relationship with Holly were about mutual understanding, love, and passion. But by 2005, the relationship between the two lovers had become argumentative, strained, and divisive. When Matthew quarreled with Holly, he left home and spent the night with one of his friends. It wasn't a one-time incident, and friends advised Matthew to end his relationship with McFeature. They had a bad feeling about Holly, noticing her selfish behavior. Yet, Matthew never listened to any of them. Instead, he returned to Holly every time. Matthew had a life insurance policy, the beneficiary of which was Holly McFeature. Friends advised Matthew to exclude Holly from the list of beneficiaries, but he did not listen. That's how Russell Hersey, Matthew's best friend, described that period. Russell described Matthew's moods as varying between very happy and angry upset, crying upset, sometimes fearful. Russell testified he was aware that Matthew had become depressed during this time. According to Russell, Matthew was too happy over what life would be, and he was so looking forward to raising all 3 children. Because of the volatile situation, however, Russell advised Matthew that he needed to protect himself and remove any guns from the home. In 2006, when the hockey season ended, Matthew started gambling on the internet, which resulted in him losing a lot of money. Matthew's family and friends noticed that he was unwell and depressed. On the advice of loved ones, he went to see a doctor who prescribed him antidepressants. In the spring of 2006, Matthew's health started to deteriorate. By Memorial Day weekend, Russell Hersey was very concerned about Matthew's physical health. Russell had enlisted Matthew's help to transfer a motor from one boat to another. Matthew, who in the past was very strong, had gained weight, sweated profusely, complained of back pain, and said he had lost his strength. Russell advised Matthew to seek medical attention and recommended a physician, Dr. Thomas Mandat. Matthew went to see him on July 26, 2006. On the day he had a doctor's appointment, Matthew called Russell and asked where Dr. Mandat's office was. During this conversation, Russell heard Holly shouting at Matthew in the background and saying he was too stupid to know where the doctor that he was supposed to go see was. At the doctor's appointment, Matthew complained of back pain. After an examination, Dr. Mandat determined Matthew had kidney stones and prescribed medicine to help with the passing of the stones and associated pain. On the afternoon of July 30th, Matthew called his father to say he bought his daughter a fishing rod. He wanted the three of them to go fishing in the coming days. According to his father, Matthew was excited and was looking forward to the meeting. On the evening of the same day, Matthew was at a party with Russell Hersey. Russell testified that Matthew appeared in grave physical condition. He had gained even more weight, was sweating profusely, and had to steady himself to walk. Matthew also complained of extreme back pain. Later that evening, Holly contacted Matthew's father and informed him that she had called 911 because something was wrong with his son. The father briefly spoke with his son on the phone, finding Matthew confused and very upset. After the ambulance's arrival, he was urgently taken to Parma General Hospital with a suspected failure of some organs. It turned out that Matthew Podolak's kidneys had failed. The doctors found Matthew to exhibit metabolic acidosis, which meant that his blood was very acidic. One of the doctors on the emergency medical team was Dr. Mandat. He was concerned that Matthew had a toxic substance in his system, something like methanol or antifreeze. Holly was also there. They asked her if Matthew could have swallowed antifreeze or medical alcohol. She said Matthew had not taken anything. The next day, on July 31st, 2006, Matthew Podolak died in hospital due to kidney failure. According to Dr. Mandat's testimony, metabolic acidosis usually occurs due to respiratory problems, but that was not the case here. Dr. Mandat explained that ethylene glycol can also cause metabolic acidosis. Matthew's death was heartbreaking to his family and friends. Everyone except Holly was devastated. Holly's friend, Rebecca Vega, testified that she reached out to Holly to support her in the days following Matthew's death. She went to the funeral home with Holly to make arrangements. Vega found it curious that Holly did not show emotions whatsoever, one way or the other. Matthew's father testified that at the wake, he had to ask Holly McFeature to come into the room where the casket was to receive visitors. She acted as if she had no feeling in her. Russell Hersey described Holly as acting like it was a party and like nothing had happened. Soon after, everyone heard another very remarkable detail. The day after Matthew's death, on August 1st, Holly went to the bank to use an ATM to withdraw money using Matthew's bank card. Moreover, she wrote checks in his name and cleaned out his bank account. Holly was arrested and charged with 2 counts of forgery after his mom reported the activity to the police. She later agreed to make restitution and was placed on probation for a year. Her family insisted she had just been trying to get money to provide for the couple's children in Matt's absence. Holly McFeature was also a beneficiary on Matthew's life insurance policy. However, the policy was small, and Holly only collected $10,000. 2 weeks after Matthew's death, Holly's friend, Rebecca Vega, came to visit her. She saw what appeared to be cleaning solvents out in the open in the kitchen. Given the young age of the children in the home, Vega found it concerning. She asked Holly about it. Holly responded that one of the items was antifreeze and explained that Matthew used it to winterize his boat. Yet, Matthew's best friend, Russell Hersey, testified that Matthew had not had a working boat since 2004 or 2005 when the boat's engine failed. Michael Jakima, a Cleveland police officer, has known Holly McFeature since 2002. She babysat his children. He would go to her house to have coffee and talk. He typically called ahead because he did not want to interrupt another man's house. One day, he called Holly to see if he had caught her at a bad time. She said he did not have to worry about that anymore. She stated, "Oh, Matt died last week." The woman spoke about it very casually. She told him Matthew had issues with his kidneys and had been in pain from playing hockey. There was no emotion in her words. It sounded so casual that it seemed careless and heartless to me, Michael said. Everything belonging to Matthew had been taken out of the house. Holly gave Matthew's computer to a friend to remove some content from the hard drive. She cut up Matthew's clothes to make a quilt. Now, his father and brother had no Matthew's clothes to remember him by. 6 weeks after Matthew's death, Holly started dating Charles Lipscomb, who was a Cleveland police officer. At the beginning of their relationship, Holly informed Charles that her ex-boyfriend had died due to kidney failure. But soon, she changed her story after the release of autopsy results in January 2007. The autopsy showed that Matthew Podolak had a vast amount of ethylene glycol, the active ingredient contained in antifreeze, in his system. Holly said to her new lover that perhaps Matthew was taking something of his own free will because he wanted to end his life. The autopsy report concluded that the cause of Matthew Podolak's death was chronic intoxication by ethylene glycol. However, the coroner couldn't determine the manner of death. In addition, it is worth noting that Holly told Charles Lipscomb that she had no idea what antifreeze was. She said to another friend, Sean Walsh, that Matthew had died in an industrial accident. She also said that one of his colleagues could have poisoned Matthew out of envy. After all, he was the boss's nephew and had an advantage over other employees. But Matthew's family believed the culprit may have been someone much closer to home. Although McFeature's sister insisted Holly had been crying in the car before the funeral, her seeming lack of emotion during the service struck Matthew's family. During the same year of 2007, when Holly relocated, detectives went to the house and took 2 bottles of antifreeze from the garage. It was recorded in the police report. At the end of 2007, after breaking up with Charles Lipscomb, Holly met Jameson Kennedy at the bar she worked at. In the spring of 2008, they began dating, and Holly did not tell him any details about Matthew's death. Jameson Kennedy had a considerable criminal history. He also abused alcohol and illegal substances. One day, in September 2008, Holly and Jameson were drinking and making love, and she, according to Jameson, was very emotional and started talking about Matthew. She started crying and said she just wanted it all to go away, and that she wanted to move out of Cleveland. She shared that she regrets what happened. Jameson asked Holly what she was sorry about, to which Holly replied that she had put something in Matthew's drinks, which made him feel sick over time and eventually caused his death. Jameson wasn't sure if she was telling the truth. After hearing Holly's confession, Jameson met with an old friend, Santiago Feliciano, who was a lawyer. Jameson told Santiago about what Holly had confessed to him. Santiago, in turn, advised Jameson to report this information to law enforcement agencies if he believed it to be true. After that, Jameson called Holly to discuss what she confessed to him. Holly didn't know that their conversation was being recorded. Jameson hoped that she would once again admit that the cause of Matthew's death was something she had put in his drink. But during that phone conversation, Holly categorically denied ever harming Matthew. She said, "You're putting words in my mouth right now, because I never said any such words to you about ever putting anything in his drink. I would never have done that." Soon, the relationship between Holly and Jameson started souring. He believed that she had cheated on him. On November 8, 2008, he came to her house to sort it out and tell her what he thought of her. Scared, Holly called the police. When the officers arrived at the house, Jameson attacked them. He was arrested and charged with assault. Subsequently, Jameson Kennedy was found guilty and sentenced to 10 years in prison for assaulting officers. But that's not all. After his arrest, he decided to tell the police about Holly's alleged confession. He had no desire to cover up for the person who contributed to his arrest. Thus, there were more and more facts indicating that Holly McFeature was involved in the death of Matthew Podolak. The police started investigating his death back in 2007 when the autopsy report was released. However, since the police didn't think of Matthew's death as an intentional deprivation of life, the case stalled for many years. Now, let's take a closer look at the autopsy report. Dr. Galita was a forensic pathologist and medical examiner for more than 10 years. His job responsibilities included conducting autopsies and determining the causes and nature of death. He has performed over 3,500 autopsies. He performed the autopsy of Podolak the day after he died. 6 months later, in January 2007, he issued an autopsy report detailing his findings. The report was signed by him and then County Coroner Dr. Elizabeth Balraj. The report concluded the cause of Podolak's death was chronic intoxication by ethylene glycol, but manner undetermined. According to Dr. Galita, the ethylene glycol ingested by Matthew Podolak went into his blood and then to his liver, where it got rapidly metabolized by alcohol dehydrogenase. Alcohol dehydrogenase is an enzyme, or biological substance, that facilitates some chemical reactions in the body. After the metabolization, it was transformed into oxalate that combined with calcium to form calcium oxalate crystals. There was a massive amount of these crystals in Matthew's kidneys. They blocked their proper functioning. Dr. Galita testified that the flank pain that Matthew experienced beginning in May 2006 was due to the crystals in his kidneys. When examining Matthew's kidneys, he found that in addition to the damage in the kidneys, there was evidence that the kidneys were attempting to heal. Dr. Galita also found the crystals in Matthew's heart and brain. Moreover, he determined that Matthew had very severe acute myocarditis in the heart. Myocarditis is an acute inflammation of the heart muscle. The doctor testified that Matthew would not have developed myocarditis from a single acute case of ingestion of ethylene glycol. Rather, the myocarditis needed at least 3 weeks to develop. Galita ruled out that Matthew had suffered a heart attack. Dr. Galita concluded that Matthew died as a result of chronic intoxication by ethylene glycol, and that his death resulted from a sequence of acute events, acute sublethal intoxications from time to time, for at least 3 months. Matthew's friends testified that Matthew's favorite beverage was raspberry iced tea, and he would bring it to work either in a thermos or in its original half or whole gallon container. His friend, Michael Mulhall, testified that Holly McFeature would sometimes bring lunch to Matthew at work. Moreover, it always included a half or a whole gallon iced tea container. The police collected 2 bottles of antifreeze, a Peak brand and a Saturn brand, from the garage of McFeature's home in August 2007, after she had moved out. In 2010, 3 years after the release of the autopsy results, there were amendments to the report. The amended report, signed by then County Coroner Dr. Frank Miller, concluded that Podolak died as a result of chronic intoxication by ethylene glycol and was homicidal in nature. The amended report did not change the cause of death, but changed the manner of death from undetermined to homicide. 6 years after Matthew's death, the authorities decided it was time to arrest Holly McFeature. In July 2012, she was charged with aggravated deprivation of Matthew Podolak's life and with contaminating a substance for human consumption or use. Matthew Podolak's older brother, Mark Podolak, said his family suspected McFeature had something to do with his brother's death. "She just wasn't acting like somebody who was losing or about to lose a loved one," he said. Authorities believe that Holly had been adding antifreeze to Matthew's cold raspberry tea for weeks or even months. She pleaded not guilty and appeared in court in 2013. The case against her had only circumstantial evidence. At the trial, the prosecution presented 15 witnesses, which, in addition to Matthew's family and friends, included Dr. Galita, Dr. Thomas Mandat, Matthew's attending physician, and several police officers who investigated the case. At the trial, they talked about Holly's behavior, Matthew's phone call before visiting the doctor, and the fact that Matthew had not had a working boat since 2004 and had no need to use antifreeze for these purposes. Holly McFeature's lawyers argued that Matthew's family and friends believed Holly was guilty and launched an aggressive campaign aimed at law enforcement agencies to bring her to justice right after he died. The state's key witness was the medical examiner, Dr. Galita, who performed the autopsy. He testified at length about how he reached his conclusion that Matthew Podolak had been chronically poisoned over 3 months. He explained that he found crystals in Matthew's kidneys and cardiac myocarditis. Both of these conditions can arise due to exposure to ethylene glycol. He eliminated other causes of myocarditis, such as bacteria, fungi, and viruses. Moreover, he testified that myocarditis would not have occurred from a single acute exposure to ethylene glycol. Galita also explained why he changed the initial autopsy report 3 years later. He explained the coroner's office did not have enough information in 2007 to rule the death as an intentional life deprivation, and therefore, the manner of death was initially undetermined. Other witnesses' testimony corroborated Dr. Galita's determination of the cause of death. Matthew's friends testified that in the spring of 2006, Podolak's health began to deteriorate. He was diagnosed with kidney stones in July 2006. His health continued to decline after that. Regarding the relationship between Podolak and McFeature, the state's witnesses testified that the relationship had turned volatile. Matthew appeared to be fearful. One friend advised Matthew to remove his weapons from the home, and he listened to that advice. Holly's lawyers argued that their client had nothing to do with Matthew's death. Their theory was that Matthew was depressed at the time because he had suffered losses from gambling on the internet, work was not going well, and he had problems communicating with his young child. Therefore, in their opinion, he deliberately swallowed a lethal dose of antifreeze. Holly's defense also argued that Matthew died after taking a single dose and not from multiple doses taken over several weeks or months. In support of this theory, the defense presented Dr. Robert Bucks, the coroner from El Paso County, Colorado. He testified that Podolak suffered from acute poisoning, meaning that it was a one-time ingestion of ethylene glycol, which would be indicative of Podolak's desire to end his life. Dr. Bucks disagreed with Dr. Galita's finding of myocarditis. Instead, he testified that he believed Podolak had suffered a heart attack. Moreover, Dr. Bucks testified that a person can have myocarditis without ethylene glycol poisoning, and that flank pain shouldn't be a symptom of ethylene glycol poisoning. According to Dr. Bucks, there was no relation between kidney stones and ethylene glycol poisoning. The state, however, presented testimony showing that, although Matthew suffered from some depression, he was committed to being a father to his children. He had been making plans for and with them as late as the day before he died. There was also testimony showing he sought medical treatment for both his mental and physical ailments. One of those who testified at the trial was Jamison Kennedy, to whom, as he claimed, Holly confessed to having mixed something into Matthew's drinks. Kennedy was taken to the courtroom from prison, where he served a 10-year sentence for assaulting police officers called by Holly. He reiterated that Holly had confessed to him that she was involved in Matthew's death, but Holly denied ever saying that. Notwithstanding Kennedy's credibility issues, the transcript reflects Sergeant Michael Quinn's testimony that at the time Kennedy told law enforcement about McFeature's confession, there was no public information that Podolak had died as a result of ethylene glycol poisoning. In other words, the record does not support McFeature's claim that Kennedy merely reported what he had heard elsewhere. Holly stated Kennedy said that either to gain leniency in his criminal case or exact revenge on McFeature. It took the jury 3 days to make a decision. They found Holly McFeature guilty on all counts. On August 28, 2013, the court sentenced her to life in prison. After 30 years, she will be able to apply for parole. This case had only circumstantial evidence and witness testimonies. Do you think Holly was actually guilty? Could Matthew have deliberately been drinking antifreeze for 3 months to harm himself? Share your opinion in the comments, and thank you for watching this video to the end.